is an Around the A Offseason update with David Foote and Patrick Williams on the Sports Podcasting Network.
After a couple weeks off, we're back with another Around the A off-season update on the Sports Podcasting Network. David Foote, Patrick Williams here with you. We've been waiting, Pat, for the headlines to build up, I guess, a little bit so that we've got some stuff to talk about. And boy, do we ever have some stuff to talk about now. Affiliation agreements, the resurrection, if you will, of the Palm Springs Seattle affiliate. We've got a new head coach in the Penguins organization, and we've got a great interview coming up in a little bit as we dive deeper into the Dallas Stars' success in the NHL bubble and a lot of former AHLers really making impacts on that run to the Cup Final for Dallas. We're going to be joined by Brien Rea, who is a former voice of the Texas Stars, now working on the Fox Sports studio panel in Dallas. So we're looking forward to that. Let's get to perhaps what was the most breaking news just before we recorded, and thankfully we waited to do this week's show as we get the news out of Seattle and Palm Springs that they are going to continue that affiliation, but with some changes. Seattle's AHL team essentially won't come in until a year later than expected, and there's a little bit of a different look as far as who's partnering with the arena and things like that, but all in all, I think good news given the uncertainty that was circulating around that team and that affiliation just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely. That was really the big question mark. Well, there were a few question marks all summer, but that was one of the big gaps in the AHL map. Just a little background. Last year, September 2019, Seattle announces Palm Springs is going to be their new AHL affiliate. Palm Springs is it's roughly about 2 hours outside of Los Angeles, Southern California. It's about an hour or so from the Ontario Reign, 2 hours from the San Diego Gulls. So geographically, great fit for the American Hockey League. Direct flights there, which is always a huge thing, especially in the Western Conference. And everything looked great. February 2020, they were supposed to break ground on a new 10,000-seat, $250 million arena and practice facility. Well, that got postponed. That was the first sign that there was some real cracks in the plan. There was a lot of opposition, parking-wise, traffic-wise, in downtown Palm Springs. And then the pandemic hit in March 2020, and the whole plan just really went very quiet. I couldn't shake any information out of anybody for the longest time.
And we tried. We should let everybody know.
We tried. As you know, on this program, we are big fans of the Palm Springs expansion initiative. But nobody was talking. And obviously, then Seattle, for much of this summer, has been busy with their own business in terms of the name, the logo, and getting some more hockey ops people hired. So they had a lot on their plate above and beyond the American Hockey League club. So, but finally, it looks like we have some clarity. It was the same plan in terms of the 10,000-seat building. It's going to be in Palm Desert, right off Interstate 10, so about 20 minutes outside of Palm Springs. They're no longer partnering with the Agua Caliente group. Instead, they'll partner with the H.N. Francis Berger Foundation, which is a nonprofit out there. A lot of money. Tends to be the case in Palm Springs, and it's going to be a little bit more of a suburban setup than it initially was. But the same general idea, and it's all systems go now. I've been told that Seattle will look to scatter their players around next season, 21-22, and I think that can work. Vegas had a full affiliate their first year, but generally that first couple years are mostly players that are just going to be recall options. So it's more of a taxi squad than a traditional development team. So they can probably make that work, especially if they can get some guys placed with the Western Conference clubs. It shouldn't be too difficult. Seattle's an easy place to reach. There's a number of big markets that have direct flights, so that shouldn't be a major issue. And then fall of 2022, Should be, knock on wood, if you're Seattle and Palm Springs, it should be all things go. And that will be a huge fit for the Pacific Division, which is already adding the Henderson Silver Knights just outside of Las Vegas. So that whole map is really filled in nicely in the last 5 years.
Yeah, and the Henderson getting going on construction on their facility as well. So lots happening as far as future affiliates go, but some news with current affiliates as well. Let's say finally breaking this week. It seemed like, us and Tony Andrikaitis over at Inside the AHL, we were all kind of hanging around waiting for this to become official. But the Charlotte Checkers divorcing, if you will, from the Carolina Hurricanes, and then obviously the whole Chicago-San Antonio mess, and then Springfield and Florida split up as well. We talked about it a couple shows back here on Around the A if you want to go back in the archive and check it out. But a little bit of steadiness now as we see some affiliation agreements signed. It's strange. It's a little bit odd the way that some of these are going to work, but we now have homes for the Checkers and for the Wolves, as the Charlotte Checkers will join on with the Florida Panthers and the Chicago Wolves with the Carolina Hurricanes. It's odd, but I'm sure those NHL parent clubs are at least happy to have deals done right now.
Yeah, really the worst kept secret in the American Hockey League for the past several months. I mean, this whole thing feels like it's been dragging on as long as this pandemic almost.
Yeah.
And I think the word that used, divorce, is a very fair word to use. Charlotte and the Carolina Hurricanes, which, at least from the outside to all of us, I guess, to sort of play with that marriage analogy, looked like the perfect marriage. 2019, they win the Calder Cup. Carolina's a team on the upswing. They're developing players left and right who are going on to the Hurricanes and really making a big contribution. They got a number of guys still coming up. Jake Bean, Alison Jelkovic, who was goalie of the year in that 2019 Cup club. So everything, I mean, on the outside looked like the perfect ideal marriage. You're about 2.5 hours between cities. You're in state. That was a huge part of the marketing initiative. The One Carolina, we're all in this together. They even moved their ECHL affiliate to Greenville nearby. Everything looked perfect, right?
Yeah.
First cracks really started to appear this past season. Everything I've been able to gather is just a difference of opinion on how to structure the affiliation arrangement. And eventually both sides decided to look elsewhere. I think this move comes with some real risk for the Carolina Hurricanes, the Chicago Wolves. They like to do things a certain way, and from their end of things, you can't dispute how they do it. They put fans in the building and they win games. And if you're a hockey team, I mean, that's not a bad outcome. But in this new development-oriented world, where it's kind of the first and last thing, that can sometimes be a tough fit. And Carolina's going to be the 5th NHL club to affiliate with the Chicago Wolves since 2011. So we're going to have to see how that fit goes. I think it's a little bit more difficult, obviously, now in a pandemic and post-pandemic. You're trying to move players back and forth by plane rather than put them in a car and send them down the highway to Charlotte. That's another concern I would have. But Carolina insists they can make it work. Chicago insists they can make it work. So I guess time will tell. And then for Charlotte, this is a difficult outcome, but on the one hand, they do get the Florida Panthers, who I can tell you are really excited to be there. Florida's bounced around from one affiliate to the next year, every 3 or 4 years, it feels like. Just since 2015, they were in Portland and then Springfield. Before that, they were in San Antonio. So they've toured North America, you could say. Now this is going to be the closest affiliate they've ever had, Florida Panthers. Just a quick flight away. I did the research. It looks like somewhere in the range of 25 to 30 direct flights from Charlotte to South Florida between the two cities. So really, really convenient for the Florida Panthers, and it should be a really good fit for them. But I think on the whole, it is in some ways a sad outcome that the Charlotte Carolina affiliation couldn't work out long term, because when they went down there in 2010, Carolina was really, really pumped up to be there, and it was really the AHL's first push into the South since the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But it just they couldn't keep it going, and here we are. And it does kind of fly in the face of the trend for the last 5 to 10 years of nearby affiliations. Everybody, I mean, really that whole 2015 move was about shaking up 1/3 of the league, so that everybody could get their affiliates closer to home. And here you have an affiliation that was as close as could be, and they break up and they go further apart. But sometimes you just can't make the marriage work, to finish that analogy, and we'll see how it goes. But I think for Charlotte, it's not ideal, but there's something to be said for being with a partner that really wants to be there, and really excited to have their players play there. And I think with a new management in Florida, Bill Zito, who had such a huge role with the Columbus and Cleveland affiliation for so many years, I think there's a lot to be excited there if you are a Charlotte Checkers fan.
Yeah, and just to kill the uncertainty and to have the deals done is a big thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, any steadiness that we can find right now, I think people are going to latch on to and be happy about. So, again, it's Charlotte and Florida and the Chicago Wolves and the Carolina Hurricanes. It's interesting, but it's done, and we'll see how it works out here moving forward when we do eventually get things going again. One more thing to touch on before we get to our interview again. Brien Rea is going to join us. He's a studio host for Dallas Stars broadcast with Fox Sports, spent 4 seasons with their AHL affiliate in Texas as their play-by-play voice and director of broadcasting. And we're going to get into not only what the future may hold for the American Hockey League and those affiliate teams when we do get back to hockey, but also we'll dive deep into the performance of Denis Gurianov and other former American Hockey Leaguers that are making a massive, massive impact for the Dallas Stars on their run to the Stanley Cup Final. That's coming up in just a few minutes. First, we talked about coaching changes in some other markets a few weeks ago, but another announcement coming here, Pat, from Wilkes-Barre Scranton, as they hire J.D. Forrest as their new head coach.
Yeah, this is the 4th coaching change of the summer, or the offseason, or whatever we're calling it these days. Ontario, Rochester, and the New Henderson Club all have new coaches, and now Wilkes-Barre Scranton, and J.D. Forrest, who was the assistant coach in Wilkes-Barre for 4 years, gets that post. He replaces Mike Vellucci, who, speaking of Charlotte, was the coach there in 2019 when they won the Cup. Then he had moved to Wilkes-Barre Scranton as head coach. Now he's moving to Pittsburgh as an assistant coach. So that has been a pathway to the NHL if you're a coach. 9 different Wilkes-Barre Scranton head coaches going back to 2003 have all made the jump from Wilkes-Barre Scranton into an NHL either head coaching or assistant coach role. So, some big names too. I mean, you look at that list, Dan Biles, Mike Sullivan, Todd Reardon, Michel Terry, and some real big names in that group. So for a young guy like J.D. Forrest, 39 years old, he's in a perfect position now. With that Wilkes-Barre Scranton club, it's an ideal affiliation. They've been together since 1999, one of the longest. I believe it's the 5th longest affiliation going right now. So he's put in the work over the years. I think he is. I mean, a coach will take a job anywhere in the American Hockey League in a lot of cases, but certainly that's one of the plum jobs. And a lot like Seth Appert with Rochester and John Wroblewski with Ontario, he's also a product of that U.S. National Development Program, and that's the trend. I mean, if you can get your foot in the door with that U.S. program, you're really on the fast track as well. It's such a development-oriented program, and you're tasked with the best players in that age group from the U.S. program. So teams, NHL clubs are really looking to tap into that setup, and a guy like Forrest really is he's on the fast track now.
Yeah, Forrest, Appert, Wroblewski, and Manny Viveros in Henderson will be the first head coach of the Golden Knights affiliate in Henderson, the Silver Knights. So lots happening on the coaching front here again as this extended off-season, summer, whatever you want to call it, continues. And again, if anything else breaks, of course, we'll be following along with the headlines as that happens. And to mention Seth Appert, we're hoping to have him on the program in the next couple of weeks. For now, though, we'll switch gears. We will turn our attention a little bit more to the National Hockey League. Inside the bubble, the Dallas Stars, first team to punch their ticket into the Stanley Cup Final. It's been 20 years in the making since they won the Cup back then. And again, being led really by some products of their farm system in Texas as well with the Texas Stars. We'll be joined by Brien Rea coming up next. He is a studio host on Fox Sports down in Dallas and is a former voice of the Texas Stars. So lots to talk about with him here on this Around the A off-season update on the Sports Podcasting Network. Thanks for doing this, Brien. Appreciate the time here in what's been a busy, extended, not so much off-season for yourself.
It's, it's strange because it feels like, yes, it's busy, but then the days off between games, there's no practices to go to. There's no morning skates to look at. It's all just making sure you're on Zoom calls with players and coaches. So maybe it's a different kind of busy, like a mental busy with the way everything has gone down. But I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, absolutely. As a guy who's typically around the team, in the locker room or around practices, what's it been like to cover the Dallas Stars run right now through the bubble? It's been so strange to watch as a media member, a fan who's not involved, but you have been obviously here for the last couple of months.
It's certainly weird. I think overall when we started watching the playoffs and you're trying to get used to no fans in the building, and then all of a sudden we have a team punch their Stanley Cup Final ticket, and there's the whole celebration with the players on the ice and all that, but there's no fans booing. There's no even watching interviews on the ice and sideline reporters socially distancing themselves from Joe Pavelski or Anton Hudobin, and they've got like the long boom mic, whoever the camera guy is. It is certainly all different imagery than we're used to seeing, but it's still just as exciting. I mean, anytime a team is going to go to the Stanley Cup Final, and a team like Dallas that hasn't been in 20 years, it's incredibly exciting. And so us on the Fox Sports Southwest side, we're having a blast with it, and to use the old cliche, just sort of embracing the moment. But it's also very, I don't know if I would say typical Dallas Stars, but as weird as their season has been, in terms of starting 1-8, and then they have like a 14 out of 16 run, and then you have a Winter Classic in the Cotton Bowl of all places, and then you have a team on a 6-game slide entering a pandemic-stricken hiatus, and then the way that they did not look good in the round robin, and then all of a sudden they get on this run and they take out Calgary, they take out Colorado, and then they take out Vegas. It's almost like, as weird as 2020 is, the Dallas Stars, given all – and mixed in, by the way, a coaching change. I neglected to mention that. It feels like the strangest bouts of adversity you could come up with have all happened to this team. And because they've happened to this team specifically, at this point, they're kind of like, look, this weird is our new normal. Like, we've been dealing with weird since the moment preseason began. So they really have not been fazed by anything. It is interesting to watch just how it's sort of carried itself into the character of the team.
Yeah, and we've talked on this program for the last few weeks about American Hockey League guys making an impact at the NHL level and getting an opportunity in the bubble that maybe they wouldn't have gotten if this wasn't the case. And Dallas has to be right up there at the top of the list as far as Texas Stars alumni who have been extremely impactful in their success over the last couple of months in Edmonton there.
Yeah, it's certainly not the number of former AHLers making the impact. I think in terms of the quality of the impact, between Rea scoring 4 goals and then the overtime winner to put him in the cup, and then Kiviranta with a Game 7 hat, complete overtime. Those are certainly 2 players. Roope Hintz has looked much better as the playoffs have gone along. He doesn't have the same goal-scoring touch as he did, in the regular season, or at least the start of the regular season when he blew up for the 11 goals in what felt like the first 2 months of the year. But, yeah, those 3. And then it's also kind of weird. Jake Ottinger, I think, gets forgotten a little bit about. The Dallas Stars are 1 goal away from Jake being a regular NHL playoff performer. Knock on wood, it doesn't come to that because Hudobin's been so good. But, Jake Ottinger has been right there soaking all of this in and even getting playing time. And then because of the coaching change for the Dallas Stars, Derek Laxdal, a coach, is an assistant now with the Dallas Stars running the power play. And it's the power play that scored the goal in overtime to put Dallas into the Stanley Cup Final. So it is certainly a mix of personnel from the AHL within the last, call it calendar 2 years, that have put their fingerprints on this playoff run for Dallas at the NHL level.
Can you take us through the Denis Gurianov story? I mean, look at 2 years ago, healthy scratch in the Calder Cup Final, which, I mean, as well as anybody, for a first-round pick to be a healthy scratch in the playoffs, that takes a lot. I mean, a lot has to have gone wrong at that point. How was he able to turn that around, get himself to where he is 2 years later?
But when I worked with Dennis, when he first came over from North America, 19 years old, whatever he was, he didn't speak English.
Yeah. I
mean, he basically did not speak English. This is a kid who was, terrified, legitimately terrified to be in front of a camera. Mm-hmm. And when you're a first-round pick, it's funny. For everything that gets talked about on the ice, you have to learn how to talk to media in front of a camera. You're going to be asked questions when you graduate from the AHL to the NHL. And so working with Denny on that, and just getting him comfortable speaking to media people after a game or for a feature story on him, he was legitimately terrified because he was not confident in his English at the time and learning. Now, his English is fantastic. It's for me, having seen the transition firsthand, it's fantastic. In terms of on the ice, I always wondered, you got to think of the culture shock. If any of us back when we were 19 or 20 years old, you think of somebody like Miro Heiskanen who didn't play in the AHL, but it's the same thing. And we have to go live in another country on our own. The only people we have to rely on are colleagues who are also in their 20s, or a coach. We don't have our parents. We don't have siblings. We don't have cousins or aunts or uncles. You don't have that. So the transition that some of these players have to go through when they're coming over from Europe, I can't even fathom what that is like. So for Dennis on the ice, physical tools were there, and it was evident they were there from the moment he started playing. He had to become much better in his own zone and in the neutral zone if he was going to make that transition to the NHL level. And that is still a work in progress. But when you score 20 goals and you put up the numbers he has in the playoffs, it's not like he's this liability on the ice. He is clearly a talented full-time NHL player who has made that jump. The few times I've asked him about the healthy scratch in the Calder Cup Final, he's taken every stride. Going through that, you learn that every single play in a playoff game, in a playoff series matters. And if you don't view it that way, you're going to make a mistake that is going to turn into a goal for the other team. The following season, and he had something like 25 goals, 26 goals. It felt like at the AHL level, was named to the All-Star game. At some point, those physical tools are going to mature. And as my co-host Brent Severn likes to say, when the brain and the body fully connect, it's a dangerous thing for certain players at certain levels. And for him, it felt like over the last year and a half, the brain and the body have finally connected where he understands what he can do to one, dominate at the AHL level, but then be effective at the NHL level, and two, to have confidence in doing that. And once the confidence starts to set in, now all of a sudden consistency starts to set in, and that's the biggest thing. And Patty, I read your stuff on NHL.com talking about AHL players, up and comers. The hardest thing is consistency, right? It's one thing to get called up and have a good 2 or 3 games, but can you turn 2 or 3 games into a strong 10 to 12 to 15 game stretch where you're being an effective player? That's the hardest thing, to make that transition. And now he's made that transition. But yeah, it's funny you asking about the story. I'm thinking back to a kid who was too scared to talk to other people because he didn't feel confidence in his English. It's amazing to see. And I will admit, I'm biased. I completely root for the kid. I've loved working with him from the AHL time to his NHL tenure now. He's fantastic.
In your role, you were in broadcasting NPR in Texas, so you're probably a lot more hands-on with that training, really, that the media training with players like Gurianov than really anybody else in the entire Dallas system.
It's, I'm not totally sure because I haven't done the PR side of things at the NHL level. But I know working with Tom Holy, he said, look, you've got to put him in front of a camera. You have to make him talk. It's kind of baptism by fire, right? But credit to him, if I remember correctly, he was taking English lessons from a tutor in Dallas over Skype during his first year, and it may have even been his first 2 years. So he was also to transition to life in North America. But I will share with you guys, this will forever be my favorite Denis Gurianov story. That first year when he was completely terrified, flat out terrified to talk to cameras. At the very end of the season, he got called up. He didn't dress for a game, but he was practicing with the team. Well, when you're a former first-round pick and it's your first call-up at the end of the year, you're going to get interviewed. People are going to talk to you. So he goes up for, 2 days, a day, whatever it was, talks with people at morning skate, on camera, whole thing. He did great. He did really good. He came back down, and the first time I saw him was morning before practice, and I'm going to do a really bad Denis Gurianov impression on this. But no, the first thing I see him, I just go, hey, Denny, and he just smacks me on the shoulder and just goes, bro, did you see my interview? and I busted out laughing. I told him, absolutely I saw it. You did fantastic. He looked at me, he's like, we practice, and you could see that transition developing on the human side of things. So yeah, from working with him on a PR aspect, anytime he did an interview, I was always standing right next to him. Anytime he wasn't sure, get taken out, to just be able to say, all right, let's pause a second. What is the clarity you need in order to answer questions? And sometimes he would say, hey, before we go on camera, what are the questions you are going to ask me? He would want to sort of not rehearse, but process his answers on whatever questions he was being asked, because he wanted it to be smooth and have a nice back and forth. He wants it to be a good conversation. So it has been a lot of fun watching his personal transition.
For you, second season in the NHL, obviously that's the goal for everybody in this business. You started, right at the bottom, had to work your way all the way up. What is this past 2 years, and especially the last couple of months, been like for you?
It's obviously a lot of fun. It's incredibly gratifying. This was for me, it was a 10-year journey from the old Central Hockey League, which doesn't exist anymore. And when I was in that league, I think I had 4 teams die on me, essentially. Going out of business. So, at one point I was apparently the kiss of death for a minor league hockey franchise. And then luckily I broke that in the AHL with the Texas Stars. But whenever you go on a journey like that and you get here, it's incredibly gratifying. The last couple of months, they were incredibly boring at first because, you don't know. Is the league going to come back in a month? Is it going to be 2 months? Is it going to be gone for the rest of the year and they cancel it? You just don't know. And so it's like, whether you're a front office person or a broadcaster, it's, what do you do? You can't go work part-time at a grocery store because those are also shut down, to pass the time. So I got to know my old PlayStation 2 a lot for a while there. But now that we've gotten back into, we did some interviews and with some Stars alumni, which was a lot of fun to have some hockey content to talk about. That was a lot of fun to work with those guys. And now that we got into the training camp and into the playoffs, like, all right, great. Here's a little normalcy. We're talking hockey again. But being a former AHL guy, I do wonder what is going to happen at that level and at the ECHL level. And I've got friends and former coworkers that have quit, furloughed, moved away, gone on to something new. I mean, it's a grim reality when you look at what could happen to minor leagues. And on a personal note, like my wife and I, we had to postpone our wedding a year. Yep. It's do something smaller. We'll do the big celebration a year from now. But we're two of many, many, many couples that had to do that as
and we
well.
do the same here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. So, yeah, how's it been? It's been as weird and disheartening and crazy as it has been for everybody else. It's just this is a new normal that we're living in, and who knows where the world is going to be in terms of this normalcy another 6 months from now and another year from now. You just don't know. And one of my favorite sayings, the fear of the unknown is worse than the fear of knowing sometimes. You know, if we know what it's going to be a year from now, we can at least plan for, okay, this is the worst case. But when you don't know, it's even scarier.
Well, have you found that, you talk about front offices. You worked in a front office for a long time in addition to broadcasting. How disruptive is that going to be when you're trying to, you've got people that are scattered. This is a business a lot of 20-somethings, 30-somethings are in. This is not always stable in the first place. People aren't going to stick around forever waiting for the American Hockey League to return. Yeah. I'm
not totally sure because I kind of dodged this bullet in terms of being able to work at the NHL level before the AHL. It's a little bit strange in a broadcast PR position. It's a very isolating position because you're on the road for half the season with the team, but you're not technically hockey operations. Well, when you're on the road, you're not a part of the front office, and I would always joke with people at the AHL level whenever front office people would ask me about, weekend plans or, hey, did you hear about this? You hear about that? It's like, no, I was in California for 12 days visiting Stockton, Bakersfield, and San Diego on a bus, because I would always joke with I would call our front office people sometimes Club 38. They think there's only 38 games in the regular season. And it's like, no, there's actually, 76. It's just half of them are on the road. It's really isolating. And if you're a broadcaster at the minor league level and you're trying to get here, I mean, now more than anything, it's such a grind and there's so much uncertainty. And at some point, minor league sports is going to resume. And minor league sports are going to need somebody to broadcast those games for their fan bases. Now, will they be full-time people on the front office staff? Will they be part-time workers? Will they be a part of a radio station cluster? I don't know. The economics of that are so different for different markets. And for me, having spent 10 years in the minors, I am fascinated by the economic structure of sports. I could go for 4 hours with you guys on this. I really could. But at some point, it's going to return. And at some point, they're going to need people to fill those front office roles. And if it's their current people that want to come back, I'm sure they will be there and they will have the right to come back. If they've moved on to other careers and other jobs and other chapters of their lives, there is always going to be the next round of college students and post-grads and 20-somethings that think they want to start a career in sports that are going to want to try it and be a part of it. And either you realize you're in for the grind and you want to go for it, or it's not for you and you move on to something else. Because it is, as you said, it's not a lucrative industry at the lower levels of the minor leagues. And so there will always be people that think they want to work in sports. That will never change.
So much uncertainty with everything that's going on. right now around the world, around hockey. But one thing's for certain, you'll be able to settle in and watch some Stanley Cup Finals action coming up in a little bit. So we appreciate you taking some time for us here, Brien. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I enjoyed it. Good to talk to you.
Brien Rea, the studio host for the Dallas Stars on Fox Sports down there, former voice of the Texas Stars. Thanks again for your time, man. And we'll find you on Twitter at Brien Rea, Brien with an E, right?
Yes, correct.
Final segment here of this Around the A off-season update on the Sports Podcasting Network and wherever else you get your podcasts. David Foote and Patrick Williams here, and we'll remind you, if you're listening to the program, you like what you hear, please rate and subscribe to the podcast. Let us know how we're doing, and feel free to reach out to us on social media at Around the A Pod or via email, aroundtheapod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you because when we get into these slower periods, Pat, I know it's been a busy show this week, we get into these slower periods, and sometimes we'll need a little bit of a nudge for what to cover. And if there's anything the fans have, on their minds, so we'd love to try to dig into that and use our connections to bring some more stories out.
Yeah, absolutely. Usually it's the opposite problem. 31 clubs, soon to be 32. It's tough finding time to squeeze everybody in there, and we're kind of at the opposite now. We talked about this early on, that news would kind of come in waves. It'd be real quiet for a while, then you get 3 or 4 pretty big stories, and then it would slow down again. And that's pretty much how it has unfolded. So we can certainly use that inspiration. I think also just, sometimes in our position, we're a little bit cut off from what the fans are thinking, what their concerns are, and getting that perspective is always really helpful. So yes, please send questions along. I don't think any question is too crazy, especially at the moment. Nobody really has tons of answers, so we're all trying to broach new ground and figure out things as we go along. Kind of that analogy of feeling your way in the dark in the middle of the night and you're trying to find the light switch. So, yeah, fans, sometimes fans really just see things a different way and, can really sort of pop that bubble that media can be in sometimes. So, yes, send the questions along, emails, comments, anything you have, we'll take them.
And while there may not be, a ton of solid answers, one thing I think that certainly is happening a lot more fluidly during these times is just good discussion and conversation and, the sharing of ideas and what ifs. There's so much hypothetical right now that you get some really good conversation, much like we had with Brien Rea just a few moments ago. Again, you can find him on Twitter at Brien Rea. That's Brien with an E, BrienRea. Also brienrea.com if you want to see more of his work, and we do thank him for his time. Mentioned just before that interview that among the guests that we're working on getting through this extended offseason, Seth Appert, the new head coach of the Rochester Americans, will be on the program coming up. We will try to get the new head coach of the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, J.D. Forrest. We've been working on tracking Brian Helmer from the Hershey Bears down for weeks. We can confirm we'll have Helms as well on the program, so lots to look forward to in the coming weeks, along with Stanley Cup Final hockey from a viewer standpoint.
Yeah, and I think the big interview that also will follow that will be Scott Howson, the new president and CEO of the American Hockey League. We're also working on John Wroblewski from Ontario. Right now, things are just a little crazy because in some cases people are packing up and taking the moving van across the country, and but we got Howson confirmed. We're working on Wroblewski, so little by little, we are starting to see some hockey news start to percolate to the surface now. And I think especially in a couple of weeks, once the NHL finals wrapped up, then you're going to see that next big push of news. You're starting to see a few assistant coaches hired, around the hockey world. And then before you know it, 3 weeks we'll be in free agency. The NHL draft will happen. So we'll go from a relative shortage of news to a lot, pretty much all at once. So we have a lot of interviews piled up. This is a great time right now, really, in some ways, to get people. In many cases, they will never be less busy than they are right now, and have more time and more availability. And And I thought that you mentioned it made a good point, about that dialogue that, the pandemic has allowed. And I think that's been one of if there's a silver lining to any of this mess, it's that it has allowed everybody to sort of slow down a little bit, stop and smell the roses. Hockey is such a never-ending cycle where 11 and a half months of the year pretty much is nonstop news. So
yeah,
in some ways this has allowed everybody to stop and catch their breath. There's been some good dialogue, and hopefully these interviews are able to provide even more of that.
That's what we're here for on Around the A, trying to get the heavy hitters when news breaks. We'll continue to do that whenever there are headlines. So stay tuned to Sports Podcasting Network, wherever else you get your podcast. And especially right now when we're not necessarily doing weekly shows, more important than ever to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, you don't miss any of the news. And again, give us a follow on Twitter at Around the A Pod as well. And you won't miss any of those news or headlines. For now, I think we'll wrap it up from the Around the A studios. A big thanks again to Brien Rea for his input, his analysis, and his stories on the Dallas Stars and Texas Stars. And, of course, a big thanks to you for listening. We hope you'll join us again next week. Patrick Williams, I'm David Foote. Thanks again for listening to this Around the A off-season update on the Sports Podcasting Network.
This has been an Around the A off-season update on the Sports Podcasting Network. Stay up to date on the latest news and notes from the American Hockey League by subscribing to Around the A wherever you get your podcasts. And find us on social media at Around the A Pod.